Why was she the only one who didn't run? The order had come sharp, cutting through the dust and chaos. Fall back, regroup. Boots scraped against broken stone as her team pulled back into the shadows, the echo of gunfire chasing them down the ruined street. But she didn't move. She stayed kneeling, her back pressed to the cracked wall, her rifle balanced against her shoulder like it was the only thing holding her upright. The air burned of cordite and ash. Somewhere in the collapsing city, a child screamed, or maybe it was just in her head. Her breath didn't quicken, it slowed. She watched her team scatter, retreating to safety, leaving her in the open, in the blind spot no one wanted to cover. And still she stayed. Not because she was fearless, not because she was reckless, but because in the chaos she knew one truth: someone had to. The mission wasn't supposed to look like this. Hours earlier, briefing lights had flickered over the room, illuminating maps, satellite feeds, and faces so tired they'd stopped pretending otherwise. She had sat near the end of the table, not speaking. She never spoke much in briefings, not unless asked. The others didn't notice her silence, or maybe they thought it meant she had nothing to add. Either way, she let them talk, argue, draw lines across the map like those lines would hold against reality. She listened, memorized. And when the colonel's finger tapped the final coordinates, she felt it, the shift in her chest. The building. The target. The chaos waiting. She didn't show it, not even in the smallest twitch, but inside she knew this mission would be different, not for them, for her. Because there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The first shot that night broke before they'd even reached the outer perimeter. It was clean, distant, almost clinical. A sniper hidden high in the black teeth of the city ruins. The bullet snapped past her ear, embedding in the concrete like an invisible warning. She dropped low. Her team cursed, scattering, returning fire blindly into the upper floors. She could feel the tremor in their nerves, the thin line between discipline and panic. "Keep moving," their captain barked. But his voice was already swallowed by the storm. The city wasn't dead. It was alive, a beast watching from windows, alleys, doorways, every shadow a muzzle, every silence a trap. And she was the one who noticed. The rhythm, the pause between shots, the small, precise corrections. This wasn't random. This was a game. Her jaw tightened as she scanned the broken skyline. Somewhere up there was a scope, an eye, a hand steady as hers. And in that silence between heartbeats she recognized it. Not the shooter, not the face, but the feeling. The same discipline, the same training, the same ghosts. Her team pushed forward, trading gunfire for inches, but the ambush widened. Not just one shooter, several, choreographed. The captain gave the signal to pull back, his voice clipped, decisive. They obeyed. Every one of them. Except her. She stayed crouched, her rifle angled upward, finger brushing the trigger without commitment. She could feel the decision, heavy, cold. Go with them or hold the line. Her heartbeat slowed again, that strange calm that only came when the world wanted her gone. She exhaled once, and the noise fell away. She moved into the darkness. The shot she fired wasn't meant to kill, not yet. It was a warning, a disruption, a crack in the enemy's rhythm. And it worked. The coordinated fire faltered, the pattern broke. For one breath her team wasn't hunted. For one breath they were free to retreat. Chaos bent into order because one person stayed behind. She didn't feel relief or pride, just the weight of inevitability. They would regroup, they would live. And she would not. Or so it should have been. Later the team would argue about it, why she hadn't followed, why she disobeyed the order. Some would call it reckless, others would call it brave. But none of them would know the truth. Because what held her there in the darkness wasn't duty alone. It wasn't loyalty or discipline, or even instinct. It was memory, a face, a promise, a reason she carried like a scar under her uniform. When she was 19, before the uniform, before the rifle, she had watched someone walk into the same kind of darkness, and she hadn't been able to follow. It was her brother. He'd been the first to enlist, the first to put on the uniform, the first to write home with words that smelled of sand and dust. His letters had been steady, measured, but between the lines she'd read what no one else had: the fear, the exhaustion, the small cracks he'd hidden from everyone but her. Then one day, no more letters. Only a folded flag. They said he died in the first minutes of an ambush. They said it was quick. They said he was brave. She never believed them, because deep down she knew someone had to stay. And that night it had been him. Now, years later, the story repeated, only this time it was her turn. Her finger brushed the trigger again, but she didn't fire. Not yet. Through her scope she saw the faint shimmer of glass high in the shattered tower. A reflection, a scope. She adjusted, calm, precise. But she didn't pull. Instead, she whispered into the silence, voice barely audible through her own headset. "Keep running, don't look back." She didn't know if they heard her. She didn't care. The enemy was out there, patient, waiting. So was she. The minutes stretched. Dust settled, the echoes died. And in the stillness, she felt it, the eyes of her enemy, searching, hunting, measuring her the way she measured them. Two shadows in the ruins. Two rifles, two heartbeats, two stories colliding across broken concrete. She knew this wasn't over, not tonight, not for her. It was only beginning. But what she hadn't told her team, what she hadn't told anyone, was that she wasn't here only for the mission, not only for the orders. She was here for him, for her brother, for the silence that had never left her since the day his flag touched her hands. And in the dark, with her rifle steady and her team's footsteps fading, she finally understood something she'd never said aloud. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of failing him twice. And so, while the team retreated, she took that one step forward. Into the black. Into the unknown. Not reckless, not fearless, but necessary. Because sometimes, in the storm of chaos, it only takes one step, one person, to turn it into order. What kind of soldier chooses to stay behind? That was the question running through the captain's mind as he counted boots in the narrow stairwell of the abandoned factory. Dust fell like ash from the ceiling with every explosion outside. His chest heaved, lungs scraping at the air, but the math still burned sharper than the smoke. One missing. She hadn't followed. He knew her name. Of course he did. He'd seen it on reports, in rosters, etched in neat handwriting on the lower corner of briefing files. He'd called it out in drills, but it was the kind of name you said without ever really knowing the person who wore it. She wasn't loud like Tors, always cracking jokes to kill nerves. She wasn't bold like Hanley, the one always first through the door. She wasn't steady like Holt, the medic with hands that never shook. She was quiet, too quiet maybe. And now she was gone. The captain slammed the butt of his rifle against the wall, rage slipping through his discipline. Why the hell didn't she move? No one answered, no one could. Because deep down they all knew maybe she wasn't supposed to. Outside, she pressed her cheek to the cold stock of her rifle. The ruins stretched silent before her, an endless graveyard of broken glass and steel bones. Somewhere in that silence, he was watching her. The sniper. The other half of this equation. She adjusted her breath, slowing the rise and fall of her chest. The trigger pressed soft against her finger, but she didn't squeeze. Not yet. Her father used to tell her patience was a weapon. Not in words meant for war, just in the way he waited for storms to pass before fixing the old truck, or in how he sat silent on the porch until the dog stopped barking at the wind. "Most people waste bullets on shadows," he'd said once when she was 12 and learning to hunt. "The smart ones, they wait for the shadow to move first." She hadn't thought about that lesson in years, until now. Because out here it wasn't training, it wasn't drills. It was a game of stillness. A duel between two ghosts. And the first one to flinch would lose everything. Minutes turned into an hour. The city's echo softened. The firefight that had swallowed her team dwindled into the distance. She was alone. But alone had never scared her, not really. She thought of her brother again, his laugh sharp and real, cutting through the memory of long nights at the kitchen table. He'd been louder than her, bolder, the kind of kid teachers remembered. But when they were little, when thunder cracked against their thin windows, he'd always sit on the edge of her bed, whispering, "I'll stay until it passes." And now, years later, she was the one whispering, "I'll stay until it passes." Only the storm wasn't thunder. It was a man in the dark, with a rifle aimed at her heart. Back inside the factory, Tor's paced like a caged animal. His nerves were shot, laughter gone. "She's still out there, Cap. You know that, right? She didn't just." He didn't finish, couldn't. The medic, Holt, spoke low. "If she's covering us, then we owe her more than sitting here waiting. We should be pushing back." The captain's eyes narrowed. He wanted to agree, but orders were orders. Their mission was survival now, not rescue. And yet, under all the logic, something twisted in his chest. Because he knew, soldiers like her didn't break ranks for glory. They didn't stay behind because they wanted to be heroes. They stayed because they had to. Because something inside them refused to move. The shot finally came at dusk. A flicker of movement high on the tower, a glint too sharp, too brief. She caught it, she squeezed. The crack of her rifle split the air, ricocheting through the ruins like thunder. The glass shattered, the glint disappeared. But silence followed. No body, no scream, no confirmation. Her stomach tightened. Did she miss? Did he move? Her pulse, steady for hours, now thudded heavy in her ears. Then another shot. It slammed into the wall inches from her head, spraying dust across her cheek. He was alive. And he was close. She ducked lower, pressing her body against the stone, ears ringing. For a moment the calm cracked and fear slipped through. Not fear of death, she'd long made peace with that. But fear of letting them down. Her brother. Her team. If she fell here, the story would be the same as his. A folded flag, empty words. Forgotten truth. She gritted her teeth, steadying her hands. "No," she whispered. She shifted, crawling deeper into the rubble, weaving through the ruin until the tower came into better view. Every step scraped her knees, tore her gloves, filled her lungs with dust. But she moved like a shadow, quiet, relentless. Because this wasn't about survival anymore. This was about balance. In the tower, the sniper adjusted his scope, breath as steady as hers. He was patient, trained, experienced. And yet, something about her unsettled him. She hadn't broken, she hadn't fled. Every soldier he'd hunted before had cracked in less time. Panic had always betrayed them, but not this one. This one was different. He almost respected it. Almost. She finally found her perch, sliding into the hollow of a collapsed balcony. Through her scope, she scanned the tower again. The holes, the windows, the faintest tremor of curtain where wind shouldn't reach. And then she saw it. The smallest flick, the curl of smoke from a barrel cooling too fast. Her finger steadied, her breath slowed. But just before she fired, memory cut through her like a blade. Her brother's last letter. "If you ever find yourself where I am now, don't hesitate. Hesitation kills faster than bullets." Her eye stung, but she didn't blink. She fired. The recoil slammed against her shoulder. Glass shattered again. This time she thought she saw a figure fall. Silence followed. Her chest rose, then fell, heavy with the weight of it. Was it over? Or was that just another shadow? Back in the factory, the captain stared at the broken horizon. The last shot echoed in his bones. He didn't know if she was alive. Didn't know if the silence meant victory or loss. But for the first time, he understood something about her. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't invisible. She was the one who stayed when no one else would. And sometimes, that's all it takes to turn chaos into order. Night settled. The ruins swallowed their color, painting everything in shades of black and gray. She adjusted her scope once more, scanning the tower. Nothing moved. No glint, no smoke. Maybe she'd ended it. Maybe not. Either way, she stayed. Because until her team was safe, until dawn broke on something more than silence, she refused to leave the darkness. Not this time. Not when she still owed him everything. How long can one body hold still before it breaks? The night had no edges. It stretched endlessly across the ruins, swallowing sound, swallowing time. She pressed herself against the balcony stone, cheek resting on the rifle's stock, eyes locked through the scope. Her muscles had stopped trembling hours ago, not from strength, but from surrender. Pain becomes quiet when it lingers long enough. And so she waited in silence as the darkness pressed against her skin. Somewhere in that darkness, the other sniper still breathed. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe she was watching a graveyard, waiting for a ghost to move. But ghosts don't make promises, and he had, with every shot. She closed her eyes for a second, just one. And there it was again, her brother's face. Not the last day, not the folded flag, but before that. When they were kids, barefoot on summer pavement, daring each other to sprint across the blacktop until their soles blistered. He'd always run farther, always. But when she stopped, gasping and laughing, he'd circle back, pressing a bottle of water into her hand with that same grin. You quit too easy, kid. Do not. Yeah, you do. One day you won't. She swallowed hard, eyes snapping open. The city returned, the tower, the silence. One day was now. And quitting was death. Inside the factory, Tors couldn't sit still. He paced the concrete floor, fingers tapping against the barrel of his rifle. His laugh, the one that used to ease every mission, was gone. You really think she's still out there? He asked, voice sharp, but not to anyone in particular. Holt, the medic, finally answered. She's not the type to stop. Tors barked a laugh that wasn't a laugh at all. What type is that? The kind that wants to die. The captain cut him a glare. The kind that knows we're alive right now because of her. The words sank heavy, choking the room. Because it was true. Every breath they took was because one of their own had stayed in the dark. And still, they weren't sure if she was breathing too. She shifted slightly, careful not to scrape stone against stone. Her legs were numb, pins and needles gnawing at her calves. Her lips cracked from thirst. But her mind stayed sharp. Every few minutes, she swept the scope across the broken skyline, looking for the faintest betrayal of movement. Nothing. And still she felt him, the way prey feels a predator, the way silence feels like it's holding its breath. He was there somewhere, waiting just like her. It wasn't just a duel of rifles anymore. It was a duel of will. And she refused to lose. Her calm crackled suddenly, a burst of static that nearly made her flinch. She pressed a finger to her earpiece. Do you copy? Sound off. The captain's voice, low, cautious. She hesitated. Speaking could give her away. A sound, a breath, even a whisper could bounce through the ruins and betray her position. But she couldn't leave them in silence either. Finally, she exhaled softly. Still here. A pause on the line. She imagined them, huddled in the dark, staring at one another as her voice returned from the void. Holt spoke next. You holding? Her lips curled barely. Holding. Static swallowed the rest. The hours bled together. Her vision blurred, each shadow threatening to morph into movement. Once she thought she saw him, a figure slipping between ruins, tall, lean, rifle across his chest. She steadied her scope, finger tightening. But it was nothing, just stone breaking against itself in the wind. Her chest ached, fatigue pressed against her bones, and then, without warning, memory surged again. Her brother, the night before his last deployment. They sat on the porch, the summer air heavy, cicadas singing in the dark. He'd handed her his dog tags. Keep them safe, I'll want them back. She'd laughed, thinking it a joke, but his eyes had lingered on hers, steady, almost too steady. And now she clutched her own tags under her vest, the metal pressing hot against her skin. Had he known, had he felt it the way she felt it now, that quiet certainty that some missions are endings, not beginnings? She blinked hard, pushing the memory away. Not yet. Not here. In the factory, the team whispered in circles. Holt wanted to return for her. Torres said it was suicide. The captain said nothing. He sat against the wall, hands clasped, eyes on the floor. His silence was heavier than their arguments. Finally, Torres snapped. She's one soldier, Cap. We can't throw the rest of us away. Holt shot back. She didn't throw us away. She saved us. The captain finally spoke, voice like gravel. Enough. The word cut through, final, but it didn't kill the truth pressing against their chests. She was out there, alone. And they were not. The night deepened. Clouds smothered the stars, making the city darker than ever. She adjusted her scope, eyes stinging. Then she saw it. Movement slow, purposeful. A figure crossing the gap between towers, rifle in hand. Her breath caught. This wasn't a shadow, this wasn't memory. It was him. Her finger steadied on the trigger. But then something strange. He stopped, turned, and for the briefest second through the scope their eyes met. Not just glass to glass. Eye to eye. Her chest tightened. There was no malice, no rage. Just recognition. As if he knew her. As if this wasn't the first time. The shot never came, not from him, not from her. They stayed frozen, two hunters in the ruins, staring across the void. Until finally, he faded back into the dark. Gone. Her breath came sharp, ragged, betraying the calm she'd held all night. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a duel. It was something else. Something personal. Something she couldn't yet name. She lowered her rifle, pressing her forehead against the cold stone. For the first time since the chaos began, a question cut through her resolve. What if she wasn't here just for her brother? What if this enemy, this sniper, was part of that story too? She closed her eyes, heart hammering, mind racing. The mission wasn't what it seemed. And neither was the darkness. How long before the body betrays the mind? Her cheek was raw against the rifle's stock, pressed there so long it felt like part of her skin. Her eyes burned, vision swimming in and out of clarity. Every shadow looked like movement now. Every whisper of wind sounded like a breath too close. The city wasn't silent anymore. It was speaking to her. Whispers in the stone. Footsteps in the dark. Or maybe just her own heartbeat, stretched into shapes her mind could no longer hold steady. She blinked, slow, deliberate. The scope swayed, the world tilted. And then his face again. Not the enemy sniper. Her brother. He stood at the far end of the ruined street, just as she remembered him before he left for his final tour. Young. Alive. His uniform too big, sleeves rolled to his elbows, grin reckless and unbroken. "You're still here," he called, voice too clear to be real. Always the stubborn one. She swallowed, throat dry, lips cracking against the air. "You didn't come back." He tilted his head, almost sad. "Neither will you if you're not careful." She blinked again and he was gone. Only rubble remained. Inside the factory, Tor slammed his fist against the wall, the sound echoing like a shot. "This is insane. We can't just sit here while she's out there. Either we go back for her or we leave. But this waiting, it's killing us." Holt's jaw tightened. "You think she waited for herself. She waited for us. That's why we're still breathing. You think we just repay that by walking away?" Tors pointed a trembling hand at him. "And if we go back, we all die. That's your plan." The captain said nothing. He sat on the cracked floor, back against the wall, eyes closed, as if silence could hold the weight of command. But inside his chest burned. He knew both men were right. And he hated it. She shifted slightly, forcing blood back into her numb legs. Every movement was pain, but pain meant she was still alive. The scope swept across the tower again. Empty windows, empty silence. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt something else. A pull. The way he hadn't fired. The way he'd looked at her through the glass. It lingered in her mind like smoke refusing to fade. Why hadn't he taken the shot? Why did it feel like he knew her? Her breath shuddered, breaking the rhythm she'd forced on herself all night. It wasn't random. None of this was random. When she was 15, her brother had taken her to the range for the first time. Not the official one on base, but the small clearing behind their uncle's farm. He'd set up cans along the fence, laughing as she squinted through the cheap rifle sights. "You don't look, you see," he told her, voice steady. "Difference is everything." She'd fired, missed, fired again, missed again. Frustration had risen, but his hand had pressed against her shoulder, grounding her. "Patience, kid. You don't chase the shot, you let it come to you." Now, years later, those words pressed against her ribs like a heartbeat. Patience. Don't chase. Let it come. Back in the factory, the medic broke the silence first. "I'll go," Holt said, voice low but steady. Tors whipped his head around. "The hell you will. If she's out there alone, she needs more than luck. She needs someone watching her back." Tors shook his head violently. "You step out there, we're all corpses. That's what she wanted to prevent, don't you get it? That's why she stayed." Holt's lips tightened. His hands, scarred and steady, clenched against his knees. "And what happens when we let the one who saved us die in silence? You live with that." Tors opened his mouth to snap back, but the captain's voice cut through. "No one's moving." It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry. But it was final. And yet, even as he spoke it, the captain knew the night was fracturing. Loyalty had turned heavy, guilt heavier still. And when dawn came, he wasn't sure he'd be able to hold them. She forced herself to drink from the small pouch at her side, water lukewarm, metallic. Each swallow scraped down her throat like glass, but it cleared her head for a moment. Enough to see the detail she'd missed before. The tower wasn't empty. On the fourth floor, barely visible behind a curtain of torn fabric, a shadow shifted, just enough to betray itself. Her scope centered, her finger steadied. But something stopped her. Not hesitation. Recognition. The shape, the posture, the way he moved, precise, careful, not reckless, not desperate. It was training. Training she knew. Her breath froze in her chest. Because suddenly, she wasn't aiming at a stranger. She was aiming at someone who had walked the same halls, who had drilled under the same commands, who had carried the same silence. A soldier like her. For a moment, the city disappeared. She wasn't crouched in ruins anymore. She was back in training, lying prone in the dust, watching the instructor pace the line of recruits. His voice barked commands, eyes sharp as glass. Stillness is survival. Hesitation is death. If you fail here, you fail the man beside you. You understand. And she understood it more than most. Now, years later, She felt that same lesson coil around her again. But this time, the man beside her wasn't one of her own. It was him, and she couldn't decide if she was supposed to kill him or understand him. The night pressed heavier. Her vision blurred again, exhaustion dragging her into half-dreams, half-memories. Once she thought she saw her brother kneeling beside her, hands on her rifle, steadying her aim. Once she thought she heard her mother's voice, soft and broken, telling her to come home. Once she thought she felt the enemy sniper's eyes on her, closer than they should have been, as if he'd stepped into her very mind. She shook it off, biting her lip until blood touched her tongue. The pain anchored her. But only barely. Inside the factory, Tor stood by the broken window, staring out into the black. His hands wouldn't stop trembling. Not from fear, not exactly. From helplessness. He remembered a night months back when she had patched a cut on his hand after a mission went wrong. She hadn't said much, just pressed the bandage tighter than necessary, her eyes unreadable. But there had been something in her silence, not cold, not distant. Solid. She hadn't laughed at his jokes. She hadn't joined the noise. But she'd been there, steady. And now she was steady for them again, out in the dark. He turned back to Holt, voice softer now. If she doesn't make it. Holt's eyes narrowed. She will. But neither of them believed it fully. In the ruins, dawn began to bleed faint light across the horizon. The gray swallowed the black, revealing the broken city in sharper lines. She blinked against it, her eyes raw. The scope swept again. The tower was clearer now, shadows giving way to detail. And there on the fourth floor, movement again. A figure stepped into view. For the first time, fully visible. Her heart stuttered, because as the light touched his face, she saw it. Not a stranger, not an enemy, but a reflection of herself. The same fatigue, the same patience, the same silence carved into his eyes. And in that moment she knew he wasn't just a sniper in the ruins. He was her story, twisted in another uniform. And the question wasn't whether she could kill him. It was whether she could live with it. Why did she hesitate at the door when all she had to do was step through? The answer wasn't simple. On the other side of the crumbling wall lay not just an enemy stronghold, but a memory, one that pressed so tightly against her chest she could barely draw breath. Sarah Martinez gripped her rifle harder, trying to remind herself that steel and discipline were enough to keep the ghosts at bay. But sometimes, ghosts wore the faces of the living. The storm had picked up outside, its wind forcing sand into every seam of her gear. The others had already moved ahead, slipping into the darkness, silent as shadows. She had taken the rear not because they asked her to, but because she knew they wouldn't. Trust was measured in glances, and she'd noticed fewer were cast her way. That sting had become familiar. Still, she accepted it. Silence was the price she paid to carry the things she never spoke aloud. A voice crackled softly through comms. Martinez status. She pressed her back against the wall, forcing calm into her tone. Rear secure, moving in. But her feet didn't move. Not yet. Her gaze drifted to the faint light flickering through a broken shutter across the courtyard. It looked like nothing, just a lamp someone had forgotten to turn off. But to her, it was a reminder. Years ago, in a kitchen half a world away, the last time she saw her brother alive, he had left the light on, waiting for her return. She never made it back before his name was etched on stone. That light had burned through her dreams ever since. And now here it was again, in the middle of a war zone. Martinez, the voice came sharper this time. She exhaled slowly and pushed forward, forcing her legs to obey. Inside, the room smelled of old smoke and metal. Dust drifted in the air, catching what little light seeped through. Every creak of the floor felt amplified, like the walls themselves were listening. She wasn't alone. A figure moved in the far corner, slouched but breathing. Civilians weren't supposed to be here. That was the rule. Yet the shape was too small to be a fighter, too still to be prepared for war. She raised her rifle, whispering the words she wished someone had once said to her brother. "Don't move, please." The figure stirred and the outline of a child came into view, a girl no older than 10 clutching something tightly to her chest. Sarah lowered the barrel an inch, her breath snagging. She knew the protocol. Detain, secure, move on. But the girl's eyes, wide, unblinking, terrified, carved into her with a weight heavier than any order. Behind her, footsteps echoed. One of her teammates entered, his presence sharp, impatient. "What the hell, Martinez? Move it." He hadn't seen the girl yet. Sarah angled her body just enough to shield the child from his line of sight. "Room's clear," she whispered, voice steady, though her heart thundered. It was a lie, a small one, but in war, small lies often carried lives on their back. The child didn't move, didn't speak, just clung tighter to the bundle in her arms. Sarah knew better than to ask what it was. She also knew better than to linger. Every second stretched thin, ready to snap. Still, she crouched low, whispering a single promise that wasn't part of any mission plan. "I'll come back for you." The footsteps retreated. Silence returned. Sarah turned and followed, her pulse hammering as if she'd left a piece of herself in that room. Maybe she had. As the team regrouped deeper inside the compound, the tension thickened. No one asked why she was late, though their eyes said enough. She felt the weight of suspicion pressing on her shoulders. She carried it, just as she carried everything else. Later, when the night split open with gunfire and orders barked through the chaos, she moved differently. Not reckless, not hesitant, but with a thread of defiance woven through her every step. Because now she had a secret tether pulling at her heart, a girl's face in the dark, a light left burning. And though no one else knew, Sarah Martinez understood something that gave her both strength and fear in equal measure. Sometimes the mission wasn't written on the briefing papers. Sometimes it was found in the shadows, in the unspoken choices, in the lives no one else noticed. And sometimes it was the reason you kept walking forward when retreat would have been easier. What made her break formation when every instinct screamed to stay with the team? The question would haunt Sarah even before the choice fully unfolded. The team had cleared the outer buildings. Debris littered the courtyard, smoke curling from shattered windows. The comms were filled with clipped confirmations, sector clear. Moving east. Contact neutralized. Voices sharp, professional, devoid of hesitation. Yet her own voice felt trapped in her throat. She walked among them, boots sinking into ash and dust, but her mind was somewhere else, replaying a promise she had no right to make. The girl, alone, holding something she wouldn't let go of. The compound wasn't done bleeding chaos, and the mission clock ticked loud in Sarah's ears. She knew her responsibility. Stay with the unit, guard the flank, push deeper into the objective. And yet, as the squad split down a narrow alley, her eyes caught the faint glow from that same broken shutter. Still burning. A quiet reminder. Her chest tightened, her boots faltered. One step, two, then she froze. Her sergeant's voice cut in, sharp and impatient. "Martinez, cover rear. Stay sharp." "Copy," she replied, steady, controlled. But her body didn't obey. Instead, she slipped into shadow. The team moved forward unaware. Sarah turned back, retracing her steps across the rubble. Her heart pounded harder than gunfire ever had, each beat asking the same question. "What are you doing?" She reached the door again, slipping inside. The silence was heavier now, broken only by the faint whistle of wind through cracked wood. The girl was still there, still clutching the bundle, eyes wide, unblinking. Sarah crouched low, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "It's me. I told you I'd come back." The child didn't flinch, but her grip tightened on the object in her arms. Sarah slowly extended a hand. "I need you to trust me." The girl's lips parted, voice fragile, barely audible. "If I let go, they'll know." Sarah froze. "Who?" The child's chin trembled, but she said no more. Sarah leaned closer and finally saw it clearly. Wires coiled beneath cloth. A trigger mechanism crudely taped. Her blood turned cold. Not a toy, not something harmless. A bomb. Her breath stilled. The girl wasn't holding onto comfort. She was being held hostage by terror itself. Sarah's instincts screamed to call it in. Standard protocol. Secure the site, detain, report. But if she said the word over comms, the team would storm the building. And the first wrong move could end the child's life in a blinding flash. Her hands trembled before she forced them still. Calm. She needed calm. She lowered her weapon, setting it gently on the floor. Then she looked into the girl's eyes, searching for the humanity buried beneath fear. "I'm not here to hurt you," Sarah whispered. "I'm here to take you out of this." The girl's eyes filled, not with tears but with something worse, resignation. As if she'd already accepted the ending written for her. Sarah couldn't bear it. Not again. Not another face she'd carry forever. Behind her the comms buzzed. Martinez status check. She didn't answer, couldn't. Instead, she slid closer, moving slow, hands open, steady voice anchoring the moment. "What's your name?" The girl blinked, as though the question itself was foreign. Finally, she whispered, "Amina." Sarah let the name sit on her tongue like a promise. "Amina, I'm Sarah, and I need you to listen to me because I know you're tired, I know you're scared, but you don't have to carry this alone." Amina's knuckles whitened on the trigger. "If I let go, it will, it will." Sarah leaned forward, voice firmer now, but never breaking its calm edge. "Look at me, just me, not your fear, not the voices that put this in your arms. Me, you're stronger than this, strong enough to let go." The seconds stretched into an eternity. And then faint footsteps outside. Heavy, approaching. Sarah stiffened. One of her teammates. She couldn't let them see. Not yet, not with the bomb live. Her options were unraveling. A voice whispered through the doorway, harsh but low. "Martinez, you in here." It was Davis, reliable, loyal, but he didn't know. And if he barged in? Sarah raised her hand sharply, signaling silence. Davis froze, eyes narrowing. He saw the girl now. The wires, his face shifted, jaw tightening. "Shit," he mouthed. Sarah shook her head hard. "Don't, not yet." Their eyes locked. In that instant he understood, trusted her, stepped back into shadow, holding the others at bay. It was just Sarah and Amina again. The girl's breathing was rapid, shallow. She was slipping toward panic. Sarah reached out, placing her hand lightly over Amina's. Warm, steady, alive. "On three," she whispered. "We let go together, one heartbeat, one choice, and you'll see the world didn't end. It's still here, waiting for you." The girl's lips trembled. Sarah began counting softly. 1, a pause like a prayer. 2, her grip firmed. 3. The girl's hand loosened, trembling, but Sarah stayed steady, easing the pressure, guiding it away from the trigger. Nothing exploded. Silence. Sarah pulled the bundle gently, laying it on the floor, cradling the wires with delicate precision. Relief surged, but it was fragile because she knew the device still breathed danger, still had teeth. But the child was free, and that was enough for now. Sarah pulled Amina into her arms, shielding her small frame. Outside, she knew the storm of questions would come. Orders would rain down. But in that moment, all that mattered was the heartbeat pressed against her chest. Fragile, but alive. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt the faint spark of something she thought she'd lost. Hope. But hope, she also knew, was dangerous. Because hope made you fight harder. It made you defy reason. It made you risk everything you had left. And deep down, Sarah understood one terrible truth. The night wasn't over. The mission wasn't done. And what she carried now wasn't just a girl. It was a secret that could tear everything apart. Why did her team's eyes suddenly feel like weapons sharper than any rifle? When Sarah stepped back into the corridor with Amina tucked against her chest, silence slammed into the air. Every boot, every breath, every glance in the narrow hall seemed to cut deeper than gunfire ever could. Her squad froze mid-movement. Weapons lowered, but suspicion rose like smoke. Davis's gaze was the first to meet hers, steady, unblinking, he knew. He had seen enough inside that room to piece together the truth. But the others, they saw only what they wanted, a civilian in her arms and a bundle on the floor she hadn't explained. "Martinez," the sergeant barked, voice flat, commanding. "Report." Her throat tightened. Protocol demanded 3 words, possible IED threat, but saying them meant the girl would be treated not as a child but as a danger. Chains, blindfold, rough hands. Sarah knew it. She'd seen it too many times before. Amina clung tighter, tiny fingers digging into Sarah's gear as if she understood the stakes. Sarah's pulse thudded in her ears. The sergeant stepped closer. His eyes, cold and pragmatic, scanned the child, then flicked back to her. "What the hell are you doing?" Sarah didn't move, didn't blink. She heard the storm howling outside, the faint thrum of rotor blades far away, the metallic clatter of shifting rifles. She had seconds to decide which truth to speak. Finally she said, quietly but firmly, "She's coming with us." The hallway rippled with disbelief. A sharp laugh cracked the tension, bitter and incredulous. One of the men muttered, "You've lost it." But Sarah didn't waver. Her arms tightened around the child, protective, defiant. For the first time that night, she let her voice carry not just obedience but conviction. "She's not a threat. She's a hostage. You treat her like an enemy, you do their work for them." The words cut, not because they were loud but because they were true. Davis shifted his stance, a silent vote of support, but others weren't convinced. Fear weighed heavy in their silence, the fear of trusting the wrong call, of risking lives for a maybe. And Sarah could feel it, the crack forming between her and them. The sergeant's jaw flexed. "You made a choice without orders. You broke formation. You compromised the mission." Sarah held his stare, "And I saved her life." For a moment no one breathed. The storm outside hammered at the windows, impatient, demanding. Then the sergeant turned, barking to the others. "Secure the compound. We move in 5." He didn't say whether the girl stayed or went. He didn't have to. The decision hung in the air, unresolved, festering. Sarah carried Amina to a shadowed corner, setting her down gently. The girl's wide eyes never left her, as if clinging to her presence was the only thing tethering her to safety. Sarah offered a small nod, the closest thing to reassurance she could give. But inside she was unraveling. Her mind replayed the mission briefing, the clear directive: retrieve intel, extract, no civilian complications. And now here she was, with a complication cradled like glass in her arms. A living contradiction, a heartbeat she could abandon. Was it selfish? Was it redemption? Was it madness? Her brother's face flashed in her memory, that kitchen light burning, waiting for her return. She had missed her chance then. She wouldn't miss it now. But choices had costs, and she knew painfully, deeply, that the cost of this one had not yet been paid. The sergeant's voice rang again, sharp, decisive. "Martinez, you carry her, she's your responsibility. But if she slows us down, if she endangers the team, it's on you. Clear." Sarah met his gaze, didn't flinch. Clear. The squad moved on, boots striking rhythm against the crumbling floors. Sarah followed. Amina pressed against her, every step heavier than the last. The girl's small weight was nothing compared to the burden of eyes burning into her back. Trust fractured that night. Not broken, not whole, something in between. And as they pushed deeper into the darkness, Sarah knew the storm outside wasn't the only one she would have to walk through. The greater storm was coming, the one where her silence, her choices, her secrets would either save them all or tear them apart. And she wasn't sure which it would be. What happens when silence is the only weapon left? The night was breaking apart. Fire traced across the horizon, crackling rifles carving echoes into the dark. The squad pressed forward through the compound's heart, each room a fresh gamble between shadow and death. And through it all, Sarah carried Amina close, as though the girl's heartbeat had become the only compass that mattered. But the weight of suspicion was heavier than the child. Every glance from her team, every clipped order, every pause in the comms reminded her she wasn't one of them anymore. Not really. She was the crack in the armor, the risk they hadn't signed up for. And still she walked on. The storm outside raged harder, wind screaming through gaps in the walls, pulling at her gear like invisible hands trying to drag her back. But there was no going back, only forward into the final chamber, where the objective waited. It was there in that dim, cavernous room that Sarah saw the end of the line. The intel sat on a battered table, maps and hard drives scattered, but they weren't alone. A handful of fighters had dug in, desperation sharpening their eyes. One wrong move would ignite the room into chaos. The sergeant signaled silently, flanking positions, precision fire. The plan was clear, but Amina shifted in Sarah's arms, her breath quick and shallow. The fighters noticed. Guns lifted. The child became a target in an instant. Sarah's blood ran cold. In that heartbeat, everything collided: the mission, the orders, the faces of her squad, the memory of her brother, the promise she'd made. All of it spiraled into a single, impossible choice. She moved. Not away, not back, but straight into the line of fire. The squad erupted, shouting, firing, the chamber exploding with noise and light. But Sarah's world narrowed to one thing: shielding the girl. Her body became the wall, the barrier, the silent defiance against every bullet meant for Amina. Pain tore through her side, fire lancing where metal found flesh. But she held. She did not fall. She carried forward step by step, chaos bending around her. And then silence. When the smoke cleared, the fighters were down. The squad stood, shaken but alive. The sergeant stared at her, disbelief etched deep. Davis rushed forward, pulling Amina into safety. Sarah staggered, breath ragged, vision swimming. Blood soaked her gear, heavy and warm, but she managed a faint smile at the girl's terrified face. "You're free now," she whispered, voice barely carrying. Her knees buckled, the world tilted. Hands caught her, rough, urgent, lowering her to the ground. Voices called her name, sharp, desperate, but she barely heard them. Her eyes locked on Amina, huddled in the corner, safe, alive. That was enough. The storm outside wailed one last time, then seemed to fade, as if even the wind paused to honor what had been given. And in that fading moment, Sarah thought of her brother, of the light left burning in the kitchen. She had never made it home in time for him, but here, at least, she had kept her promise to someone else. Her lips parted with a final breath, soft as prayer. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The words lingered in the air, unshaken by gunfire, unbroken by time. And when silence finally fell, it carried her story with it, not as orders written, not as medals pinned, but as a memory etched deep into those who had seen what one step into darkness could become. Not chaos, not failure, but the fragile order born of sacrifice. And for the rest of their lives, when the squad thought back to that night, they would remember the image that never left them. A soldier carrying more than orders, moving into the storm alone. So a child could walk free,